Wouldn't it be wonderful if all employees loved their jobs so much that they couldn't wait to get to work and were so well suited and trained that their performances were outstanding? Well, this is the ultimate goal of industrial psychology. Unfortunately, not every employee will enjoy his or her job, and not every employee will do well on a job. In this lecture you will learn the techniques developed by industrial organizational psychologists that show the way toward the goal of a happy and productive workforce. Before we can talk about these techniques, several areas must be discussed so that you will have the basics to help you better understand the rest of the lecture. This lecture has two distinct sections. The first section provides a brief overview of the field of industrial and organizational psychology, and the second section discusses the research methods that will be mentioned throughout the discussion. In this lecture you will learn that the field of I/O psychology consists of three major subfields: personnel psychology, organizational psychology, and human factors. You will also learn that industrial psychologists work in a variety of settings including industry, government, education, and consulting firms. This will also discuss that the field of industrial organizational psychology began in the early 1900s and has grown rapidly since then. That is, the Division 14 of the American Psychological Association began in 1945 with 130 members and now has over 8,000 members. The events such as the World War I, World War II, the Hawthorne studies, civil rights legislation, new technology, and changing demographics have had important impacts on I/O psychology. As future practitioners, levels which at least a master's degree is required to find employment in the field, where the median salaries currently are around $80,750 at the master's level, and $103,200 at the PhD level. Also we have remember that research is important so that I/O psychologists can make the best decisions. And lastly, decisions must be made regarding what to research, the location of the research method that will be used, the sample that will be used, and the statistics that will be selected to analyze the research data. First, let us discuss the differences between industrial organizational psychology and business programs. Remember that the industrial organizational psychology is a branch of psychology that applies the principles of psychology to the workplace. The purpose of I/O psychology is to enhance the dignity and performance of human beings, and the organizations they work in, by advancing the science and knowledge of human behavior. For example, principles of learning are used to develop training programs and incentive plans. Principles of social psychology are used to form work groups and understand employee conflict, and principles of motivation and emotion are used to motivate and satisfy employees. The application of psychological principles is what best distinguishes I/O psychology from related fields typically taught in business courses. Although many of the topics covered in this discussion are likely similar to those found in a human resource management or organizational behavior, the main difference between I/O psychology and business fields is that I/O psychology examines factors that affect the people in an organization as opposed to the broader aspects of running an organization such as marketing channels, transportation networks, and cost accounting. The typical graduate courses of business programs examine the fields in areas such as accounting, economics, and marketing, whereas I/O programs focus almost exclusively on issues involving the people in an organization. I/O psychology relies extensively on research, quantitative methods, and testing techniques. With that, I/O psychologists are trained to use empirical data and statistics rather than intuition to make decisions. It is important to remember that I/O psychologists are not clinical psychologists who happen to be in industry, and they do not conduct therapy for workers. There are psychologists who work for organizations and help employees with such problems as drug and alcohol abuse, but these are counselors rather than I/O psychologists. A factor that helps differentiate IO psychology from other branches of psychology is the reliance on the scientist-practitioner model. That is, IO psychologists act as scientists when they conduct research and as practitioners when they work with actual organizations. In addition, IO psychologists act as scientist-practitioners when they apply research findings so that the work they perform with organizations will be of high quality and enhance organizations' effectiveness. One reason that IO psychology continually increases in popularity is that, perhaps more than in any other field, professionals in the field can have a positive impact on the lives of other people. To support this last statement, let us look at a typical day in the life of a typical person. With the possible exception of sleeping, people spend more time at their jobs than at any other activity in life, and sometimes these two activities overlap. Thus, it makes sense that people who are happy with and productive at their jobs will lead more fulfilling lives than people unhappy with their jobs.